please don't get this mixed up, but that, this is our opinion, or this does not necessarily reflect anybody's beliefs or anything. So if, it's all up to you. I'm just going to give you information on it. That is it. And maybe throw in my opinion, of course, but that goes without saying. So, Scientology. What is Scientology? It's a body of religious beliefs and practices which was launched in 1952 by author L. Ron Hubbard. And he initially developed a program of ideas called Dianetics, and we've all heard of the books. It was distributed through the Dianetics Foundation. The foundation soon entered bankruptcy, and Hubbard lost the rights to the publication Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health, in 1952. He then recharacterized the subject as a religion and named it Scientology, retaining the terminology, doctrines, etc. Within a year, he regained the rights to Dianetics and retained the subject under the umbrella of the Church of Scientology. Hubbard was a strange character, to say the least, okay? He describes the etymology of the word Scientology as Latin meaning no, scio, which means know or distinguish, and logos, meaning the word or outward form. Hubbard writes, thus Scientology means knowing, or the science of knowledge, okay? That is his description of it. Hubbard's groups have encountered considerate opposition and controversy over the years. In January 1951, the New Jersey Board of the Medical Examiner's Office brought proceedings against the Dianetics Foundation on the charge of teaching medicine without a license. And Hubbard's followers engaged in a program of criminal infiltration of the U.S. government. Oh, here we go, right? That's a whole nother subject. Hubbard-inspired organizations and their classification are often a point of contention. And L. Ron Hubbard himself. He was the only child of Harry Ross Hubbard, a United States naval officer. And in July 1941, Hubbard was commissioned as a lieutenant in the U.S. Naval Reserve. On May 18th, 1943, his subchaser left Portland. That night, Hubbard ordered his crew to fire 35 depth charges and a number of gun rounds at what he believed were Japanese submarines. His ship sustained minor damage and 3 crew were injured. He ran out of depth charges, and with the presence of a submarine still unconfirmed by anybody else, Hubbard's ship was ordered back to port. A Navy report concluded there was no submarine in the area, and a decade later, Hubbard claimed in his Scientology lectures he had sunk a Japanese submarine. But there was no record of that. Reports from other ships and stuff, there was nothing there. So, I don't know. I guess that was the start of his, whatever you want to call it, right? On June, in 1943, Hubbard ordered his crew to fire on the Coronado Islands. Apparently, he didn't realize that the islands belonged to the U.S. allied Mexico, nor that he had taken his vessel into Mexican territorial waters. He was reprimanded and removed from command on July 7th, and was reassigned to a naval facility in Monterey. This background on Hubbard is to give you an idea of his mind working, which maybe wasn't working so well. Anyway, Hubbard became depressed and fell ill, and he was reporting stomach pains in 1945, and he spent the remainder of the war as a patient at a naval hospital in Oakland, California. According to his later teachings, during this time, Hubbard made scientific breakthroughs by use of endocrine experiments. Great. So this was his mindset as far back as the 1940s. He was shooting at nothing. It wasted and injured 3 crew, wasted ammo. In October of 1947, Hubbard wrote a letter to the VA, formally requesting psychiatric treatment, but admitted he was unable to afford it. Within a few years, Hubbard would condemn psychiatry as evil, which this would grow as a major theme in Scientology. So now that you know some of the background of his life, and it kind of, explains a few things. In April of 1938, Hubbard reportedly reacted to a drug used in a dental procedure. According to his account, of course, this triggered a near-death experience. This allegedly inspired by this, Hubbard composed a manuscript, which was never published, with the working titles of the One Command or Excalibur. The contents of Excalibur formed the basis for some of his later publications. Arthur J. Banks, who read some of his work in 1938, later recalled it discussed the one command to survive. This theme would be, of course, revisited in Dianetics, the set of ideas and practices regarding the metaphysical relationship between the mind and body, which became the central philosophy of Scientology. Hubbard later called Excalibur an early version of Dianetics. Okay? In August of 1945, Hubbard moved into the Pasadena mansion of John Whiteside Parsons, of course. We discussed him a few weeks ago. Him and Hubbard. He was an avid occultist and Thelemite, follower of the English ceremonial magician, of course, Aleister Crowley, and leader of a lodge of Crowley's magical order. Parsons and Hubbard collaborated on the Babylon working. This was so bizarre. The Babylon working is a sex magic that ritual intended to summon an incarnation of Babylon, the supreme Thelemite goddess. The Church of Scientology admits to Hubbard's involvement with Parsons while claiming it was for the purpose of naval intelligence. Okay. So, now you're getting some background on his, what he's done, who he's, corroborated with. And in the late 1940s, Hubbard practiced as a hypnotist, and he worked in Hollywood posing as a swami, of course. The church says that Hubbard's experience with hypnosis led him to create Dianetics. Okay, Dianetics. In May 1950, L. Ron Hubbard's Dianetics, The Evolution of Science, was published by Pulp magazine, Astounding Science Fiction. In the same year, he published the book-length Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, considered the seminal event of the century by Scientologists. And Scientologists sometimes use a dating system based on the book's publication. Now, this is interesting. For example, AD 25 does not stand for Anno Domini, but it stands for after Dianetics. So, if you ever read something AD in relationship to this, it means after Dianetics, which is okay. I'll go with that. And Dianetics, it uses a counseling technique known as auditing, okay? This is when an auditor assists a subject in conscious recall of a traumatic events in that person's past. It was originally intended to be a new psychotherapy and was not expected to become the foundation for a new religion. Hubbard variously defined Dianetics as a spiritual healing technology and an organized science of thought. The stated intent is to help the individual be free of the influence of your past traumas by systematic exposure and removal of the painful memories that these events left behind, a process called clearing. So you have an auditor helping you free you with the removal of the painful memories with a process called clearing. So there you go. Rutgers scholar says that there was little that was original in Hubbard's approach, with much of the theory having origins in the popular conception of psychology. Beryl Satter observes that in keeping with the typical 50s distrust of emotion, Hubbard promised that Dianetic treatment would release and erase psychosomatic ills and painful emotions, thereby leaving individuals with increased powers of rationality. Okay. I don't know what you think of this, but I can't think of how you can rid that person of those memories. Unless you're going to put them under hypnosis somehow. I don't know. But anyway, according to Gallagher and Ashcraft, in contrast to psychotherapy, Hubbard stated that Dianetics was more accessible to the average person, promised practitioners more immediate progress, and placed them in control of the therapy process. Hubbard's thought was parallel with the trend of humanist psychology at the time, with that, which also came about, of course, in the 50s. The appeal of Dianetics was based on its consistency with prevailing values. Shortly after the introduction of Dianetics, Hubbard introduced the concept of the thetan, or the soul, which he claimed to have discovered. Dianetics was organized and centralized to consolidate power under Hubbard, and groups that were previously recruited were no longer permitted to organize autonomously. He claims to have discovered the concept of thetan, or the soul. So, Dianetics was, of course, under the sole control of Hubbard. Two of Hubbard's key supporters at the time were John Campbell Jr., editor of Astounding Science Fiction, and Campbell's brother-in-law, a physician, Joseph A. Winter. Dr. Winter, hoping to have Dianetics accepted in the medical community, submitted papers outlining the principles and methodology of Dianetic therapy. But these, of course, were totally rejected. I think Hubbard was he was a very complex person. I think if he had been more, what's the word I want to use, more of a realist, he might have come across something. I don't know. He got into a lot of strange stuff. Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, spent 6 months on the New York Times bestseller list. And according to religious studies, Dianetics is the best-selling non-Christian religious book of the century. Publishers Weekly gave a posthumous plaque to Hubbard to commemorate Dianetics' appearance on its list of bestsellers for 100 weeks. And some studies that address the topic of the origins of the work and its significance to Scientology as a whole. There's a whole list of people who can, state that, talk about its significance to Scientology. And this, I think it was because it was something new. People were, back in the 50s, you were kind of status quo. You did you got married, you had the kids, the man worked, da-da-da-da-da. Everything was kind of, status quo. And this appears on the market, and it's something totally, totally different. And I think that's what appealed to people. Excuse me. Like I said, Dianetics appealed to a broad range of people who used instructions from the book and applied the method to each other, they becoming practitioners themselves. Dianetics soon met with the criticism, of course. Morris Fishbein, the editor of the Journal of American Medical Association, and well known at the time as a debunker of, quote, quack medicine, dismissed Hubbard's book out of hand, of course. Hubbard asserted that Dianetics is an organized science of thought, built on definite axioms, statements of natural laws on the order of those of the physical sciences. Okay. He became the leader of a growing Dianetics movement.